Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I am Ginger.
And I'm Christy.
We're with Silver Bridges Consulting, and our vet here, welcome
Hello.
in our vet team is our keynote speaker for this evening. I realize that a lot of you on the phone may not even know who the heck is Silver Bridges. What do you guys do? And so we wanted just to take a couple minutes to explain that and how it is and why it is that we have our vet here on the phone on the
Yeah.
webinar today. You want to kick it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you again for being here this evening. We are Silver Bridges, we are a consulting firm that really helps families evaluate and identify senior living options. We spend about 45 hours with every family that we help, really holding their hand and shepherding them through this process. Ultimately, our goal is to make sure that our clients are well informed so that they can make the most educated decision for themselves or for a loved one when they're looking at senior living options. So, if you are interested in learning more about us, we do a free consultation, and we would love to just talk to you a little bit more to learn more about your situation as well as to help you learn a little bit more about our approach. So, please just give us a call and we can get that scheduled.
We are big believers in education. Okay, first and foremost. So, we were so excited to have our vet now back twice, not just once, but twice, and one of our biggest audiences that we have seen here. So that's how important, how great she is, and how wonderful this topic is. About paying for care service, because that's always the question, right? Do you stay at home? Do you do community? Kind of how does that look like? So I'm going to just flip it right to our vet, who's going to give us great information. And here you go.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully everybody can
Yep.
see the slides. I'm going to rearrange things here so I can see a little bit better. All right, here we go. So this is a little bit about myself. So I actually worked in technology for 10 years. So I'm born and raised in Alexandria, Virginia, for those of you that are local to the district area. And by the way, I live in Burke, who we've been on the news like for the last 24 hours because of the microburst. Like literally the entire town is a hot mess. And last night I had no power. So I'm happy that this is tonight and not last night. So after I went to TC Williams High School in Alexandria, I'm a very proud Titan. And then I went to University of Virginia and also a very proud Wahoo. And I majored in electrical engineering, and that'll make sense in a little bit. And so I spent 10 years in technology doing global marketing and sales, right? That was the lane I was in. And then I got married, and my husband and I were talking about having kids. And I was traveling all over the world, and it was just too much. So I decided to switch industries and I went to work at a retirement home in Alexandria that I had worked in high school in the dining hall with my boyfriend. So here I was, 10 years of a global marketing manager in IT and software, came back as the marketing director at a retirement community. And that started my 15 years working in the senior housing and healthcare industry. So I worked independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing care, and hospice care throughout those 15 years. Always the person in marketing and admissions that were working with families directly who were trying to make these decisions about where they wanted to live and what kind of care they would need. And then I joined SEIA. So 9 years ago, I joined SEIA, and we are a wealth management firm. I'll tell you a little bit more about SEIA at the end. And I work for one of the senior partners, managing partners named Tom West. You'll learn a little bit more at the end as well. So when he first approached me, my answer was no, because my mother was a social worker at St. Elizabeth Hospital, which is in DC, and my father was a middle school principal in the district as well. So we didn't grow up talking about finances at the dining room table. And even though I had a very successful career in, tech, I still wasn't comfortable with that conversation. But what he convinced me was all of my years of senior housing and healthcare, he wanted to bring me into the practice because financial people don't know how to guide older adults who are in retirement years making decisions about housing and care, right? So that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years, and I absolutely love it. I am certified now. I'm not a CFP, but I'm a certified financial planner, and I do have a license, which allows me to do these kind of things, right? So, on a personal note, I wanted to share 2 months after I started my job, married, two little kids. My mom had a surgery that went bad and ended up dying 18 months later. So, here I am, new job, trying to navigate this family conversation. And Tom, the partner that I worked for, was the one that was helping me, my dad, my brother who lived out of town, and my aunt, my mom's sister, who she was very close to, navigate that financial conversation. Because I knew everything about senior housing and healthcare. And I had a ton of people who were supporting me and my family. But that financial conversation, we were right in the middle of it for the first time, right? And then within a year of the new job, my father in law decided to move into a retirement community that was close to my home, which was nice because my sister in law lives in Albuquerque and I was the one driving up and down 95 anytime anything happened to him. So when he decided to move closer to us, I was like, less for me, easier for me to get to. The kids were able to see him and all those good things. But I like to share my personal story because it also informs how I think about the financial side of this conversation, which we're going to really dive into. My parents, both of them had two master's degrees. They had amazing pensions, and their house in Alexandria was their biggest asset. We had a great house in a great city. My father in law was the Virginia State Football Player of the Year, got a scholarship to NC State, got homesick, quit, came home, was in the Navy for 2 years, and then became a brick mason. So they were completely different financial pictures. My parents had a lot of income and a set amount of assets. My father-in-law, his only income was Social Security, but he basically saved everything. So he had a lot of assets outside of his home. And both of them were able to do what they wanted to do. My mom wanted to stay home as long as possible. She ended up having to go to a nursing home, but when that time came, she understood why. And my father-in-law decided he wanted to move into a retirement community with an entrance fee, and he was able to do that. So I'm here to tell those stories. Like, I don't want you to predetermine what you can and cannot afford. We're going to walk through some examples and how I think you should think about this. What can you afford going forward? So when I talk to people, I really do look at it through three lenses, right? I consider myself a senior housing and healthcare professional still. I interact with people in that industry every day on behalf of our clients. I am a financial professional. As I mentioned, I am licensed. And I'm also, more importantly, an adult daughter and daughter-in-law who had to walk through this with my parents and most of my in-laws. So, I understand the different viewpoints and the different opinions that may be coming through. So most of you at some point have had a conversation with a financial professional. It could be the person at the bank. Maybe you have some CDs at your local bank that you know. It could be that your money is invested somewhere like a Schwab or Fidelity, Charles Schwab or Fidelity, or you could have hired a wealth advisor similar to what we do at SEIA. But whoever that person is, these are the typical conversations you would have had. What are your pre-retirement goals? Were you raising kids? Were you saving for college? Were you saving for an addition to the house, something like that? And then when you were going to retire, what were you going to be spending? So that's more like the budget, like this idea of how much are you going to need, how much are you going to spend? And then when you die, where is your money going? These are all your legacy, your estate documents, and hopefully those are all updated. And that's where you're going to share your money. But we're not going to talk about these three buckets. We're going to talk about this spice right here. Between retirement and death is when all the housing and healthcare stuff happens, right? And most financial professionals aren't trained on how to guide you through this time in your life, other than trying to sell you a long-term care insurance policy or sell you annuity, right? They want to sell a product. So that's not what we're going to talk about. We're not talking about products today. We're talking about decision making, right? So it's usually broken into two parts. So the first is like, where do I want to live, right? Do I want to stay in my home? Do I want to downsize to a condo? Do I want to move to a community? Do I want to move to community close to where I am now, or do I want to move close to where my daughter is? Those kind of conversations. And then there's also the other half of that conversation is, what kind of care do I need? So some people get a diagnosis early in their retirement years, and so they have to plan for that a little earlier. Some of them are people are very healthy, and it hits them in their 80s maybe when something is diagnosed, and they got to go from there. So we're going to talk about this space in the financial world today. You don't have to memorize this, but I like to show this to you because those of us who work in senior housing and healthcare, just like Ginger and Christy, this is the world that we know and we understand. And families and people like yourself get thrust into this and have to figure this all out and navigate it, right? You have professionals to help you, and that is why we do seminars like this, right? So let's talk a little bit about long-term care, and I will define exactly what long-term care is in a little bit. But there's a 70% chance that you're going to need long-term care services after the age of 65. So post-retirement years, 70% chance that you're going to need some kind of long-term care. And the average number of years is 3 years. So if you've been working with a financial professional all along, they may or may not have thrown in some kind of 3-year, $200,000 a year number or something in there just to do some kind of planning. But what you will see towards the end of this as we go through, that's really not accurate. It's not enough. And also, 3 years is the average. Well, what if someone has some form of dementia or Parkinson's, for existence? Like, you're not going to die from Parkinson's. You're going to live with Parkinson's, and you may need help for 10 years, right? Or if you have some kind of Alzheimer diagnosis, you may need help for 5 years. So this 3-year average really is like it's not realistic for most people. I'm going to touch base on Medicare. And the reason is people need to understand what Medicare covers and what it does not cover. All right. So what you can see here on the right-hand side, it covers your doctor's appointments. It covers if you have to go to the hospital or if you need any kind of home health, whether it's inpatient or outpatient, however that is, any kind of therapy services. If you have Part D, you can get your prescriptions. But what it doesn't cover is long-term care spending. So I just told you the average is 3 years. And none of that's going to be covered by Medicare. I'm not talking about little short-term rehab stints. We're talking about long-term care, 0%. I'm also going to touch base on Medicaid for the sole purpose of you at some point, if you haven't heard already, somebody may approach you, whether it's an attorney, a friend, someone from a church, your adult child, and say, I think we should move your assets into a trust so that we can hide your money and you can go on Medicaid if you need to. All right. So you might hear that. We hear that all the time in senior housing and healthcare. There are 3 parts of Medicaid for you to qualify. Resource is the one I was just talking about right here. Like, do you have a house? Where are your assets? Like, that's the thing that everybody wants to move to the trust, right? But you also have income. So if you have Social Security and pension, and Medicaid has Medicaid if you stay home, which is one version of Medicaid, and Medicaid if you move to community, which is another version of Medicaid, right? So that income level and what happens to your income changes versus home versus moving into a community. And there's also a medical need. Like, you actually have to have a medical need in order to get Medicaid services. So I like to tell people this idea of hiding stuff is great, but you have to meet all 3 criteria. And if you're one of those people that wants to stay home, I'm telling you now, Medicaid's not going to cover 24-hour care in your home. Like, that's not going to happen. So if your kids are telling you to put it in a trust, well, then your kids need to be around for 12 to 16 hours to help for the time that the Medicaid aid's not going to be able to be there, right? The other thing about Medicaid, when it looks at communities, the nicer communities aren't the ones that you're going to get to go to. Those nice communities may be Medicaid certified, but they're saving those beds for those residents that are moving through their continuum, which we'll go through, not from people coming from the outside. So if Medicaid is something that is realistic for you from a planning perspective, it is a great tool, is a great financial assistance tool for people who need it. It is not necessarily the right thing for people who have enough assets to pay for the care that they need, and I will show you how we do those calculations. So as you sit here today, are you debating whether it's cheaper to stay home versus move? This is always a conversation, right? Number 2, are your children, your friends, or your financial advisor questioning why you would pay to move? Like those big entrance fees, we can talk about those a little bit. Like, why would you do that? We could just renovate the basement and you can stay home and that's going to be cheaper, but might not necessarily be the right fit. And lastly, if you're an engineer, I love talking to my engineers. If you're building a spreadsheet to try to figure this out, you can't figure it out. It doesn't work on a spreadsheet. It's a multivariable analysis. And I'll show you an example of how some of the stuff that we do actually visualizes and how that works, right? So one of these 3 things, hopefully, is one of the reasons why you're on the call tonight, and you're going to learn a lot, and I'm going to help answer some of these questions. So the cost of staying home. These are some real numbers, right? So actually, we live here in the district. I know people might be from all over the place. So if you want to stay home, from a budgeting perspective, we tell clients that you need to budget $40 an hour if it's just for a few hours, right? So there's usually a 4-hour minimum for home care. So you can't get 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the night. It's literally 4-hour block, right? So just budget for about 4 hours, $40 an hour for a little bit of help. But if you're going to stay home, those hours are going to increase over time, right? And if you want to stay home with 24-hour care, the budget should be $400,000 a year, right? That's the budget. Just put that budget in your thing, $400,000 a year. I told you it was an average of 3 years. So an average of 3 years at $400,000, that should be your minimum amount that you're planning to budget for. I always get the question about a live-in. Live-ins are great, but live-ins need to sleep, take breaks, and take vacations. So they might be a little less expensive, but who's going to do the work when the live-in is not there? So when I'm working with clients, I'm like, let's just budget for the around the clock 24-hour care. And if it comes in less than that, then great, right? But let's just budget on the high end. If you're going to stay home, there's more things than you need to do other than bringing care in, right? So number one, people always talk about the home accessibility renovations, whether it's adding a ramp like up to the front steps, whether it's adding a chair lift so you can get from the first floor to the second floor. Maybe the first floor doesn't have a full bath and the bedrooms are on the second floor. You can do a chair lift, those kinds of things. By the way, I tell this story all the time. I had a client, chair lifts sound great, but the older you get, the more frail you get, the more afraid you are to get in the chair lift. If someone has a dementia, some form of dementia, you don't want them getting in the chair lift because they may try to get out halfway up. And my client who had one hated it because her grandkids came over and played in it all the time. So chair lifts sound good, but they're not always practical. All right. Just like to put that out there. Home maintenance services. Now, these are things, again, that when I'm working with clients, I'm like, let's put this in your budget to plan to stay home. If you are the person tinkering around the house, changing the light bulbs, checking the filters, doing all the little things that you've been doing for 50 years, as you age, you're going to be less able to do those things. And it's not fair to rely on your neighbors or your church friends or your family member to come over every time you need something. So I prefer clients build a relationships with some kind of handyman or maintenance service while they're still able, and maybe have them come in once a quarter. And then you get to know them. You can ask them questions. You get to trust them. So that if something happens, you're not bringing a stranger in for the first time. So here locally, one of the franchises that I really like is called True Blue. They have different franchises, I think all over the country, but a lot of them are senior certified, which I think is very important. Home generator. Boy, I needed a home generator last night here in Burke with that microburst thing. So if you are in an area that loses power often, then you should have a home generator. But what if you have a CPAP or BiPAP? You should already have a generator, right? Because you need that. You're supposed to be using that every night. How many times have we heard people have an emergency, they go to the hospital, and then they come home on oxygen? If you have oxygen and your power goes out, what are you going to do? So I always said, let's just budget a small little home generator. It doesn't need to do the whole house. It can just do a room. That way, if the power goes out during a hurricane or a bad thunderstorm, you have it. If you go to the emergency room and you come back on oxygen, you have it, right? Not that expensive. All right, here we go. I wish I could see everybody's hands. How many people are actually using food delivery services like Instacart or Uber Eats, or transportation services like Uber or Lyft, or sometimes senior taxi or some other kind of method of transportation other than driving? This is really important. If you really want to age in place in your home, you have to be able to get out of your home. And as you age, it's going to be harder and harder to drive, and you're going to be less able, and you become secluded in your home. And once again, it's not fair to rely on everybody to bring you everything or take you everywhere. So now's the time to start using these apps and start using these delivery services or these transportation services. So I'll tell you, like I had my dad, like he came up to visit. He doesn't live nearby anymore. And I'm like, okay, we're going to Uber to dinner. And he's like, well, why are we going to do that? I'm like, because I want you to have the experience of Ubering, right? So we got the app loaded on his phone. I don't think he's used it yet, but this idea of like, I can have food delivered, just like they used to order in, like all of that. Start getting used to it. And you can have your adult children or your friends or somebody do it with you for the first couple times until you feel comfortable doing it by yourself. But please start doing this, especially if you're stubborn and you think you want to stay home. I'm also going to talk a little bit about visiting physicians. So back in the 50s, doctors used to do house calls with their bags, and then that went away. But during COVID, physicians started seeing people in their homes again. A lot of those were concierge and private pay services. But now there are practices where they will have physicians, or more likely a nurse practitioner, who can come visit you in your home and charge your insurance. So right now, whatever primary care, we're not talking about your specialist, because your specialist are your specialist, but your primary care doctor, if your primary care doctor is your age or older, then I'm going to say it's time for you to change doctors, because that doctor is aging while you're aging. They're going to retire when you need them the most. So within the practice that you're in right now, start to get to know a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, or somebody else that is a generation younger, if your doctor is your age, to make sure as you age that you've got somebody in that practice that has some history with you, right? And it would be nice if they had a visiting physician service, just so that somebody can come check on you. And the last one is care management. I'm going to have a whole slide on care management. They're basically like the consultants of the industry. But what I want you to see on this list is all of these items when I'm dealing with clients who want to stay home that we need to account for the cost of all of these things in the budget for staying home. It's not simply bringing care in, it's bringing care in plus all of these things. All right, so here's care management. They're also known as aging life care professionals or the consultants of the industry. I like them because they're usually either social workers, nurses, or physical therapists, or some kind of, medical background. And they can be the eyes and ears in the home. So if the two of you are married and, one's starting to have trouble, you're not going to listen to each other. Your child is going to come from out of town. You're not going to listen to them. If you are what I call a solo ager, you're living by yourself. So it could be that you are a widow, you're divorced, your kids don't live anywhere nearby, or you don't have any kids, any of that, but you're by yourself in the home. You need a professional who can come over and check on you and tell you when it's time to tweak something around the house to keep you safe, right? So care management, they are fantastic. I also tell adult children who don't live near their parents that this is one thing you can do, because adult children, we worry about our parents being in the house alone and what's happening. So sometimes a good compromise is getting a care manager so that the parents, you guys have somebody as your advocate, and the child feels like adult child feels like they have someone searching it, like checking in. So it actually helps the communication in the family a lot by bringing in a third party. This is the website. You can do a zip code search. Very easy to find, but they're fantastic. Okay, so we've talked about staying home and how do you budget to stay home, right? And some numbers around actually how much it's going to cost. Now let's talk a little bit about the different types of communities. And this is really important. This is where Silver Bridges, this is their lane, right? So this is where they can help you navigate and understand all of this. So first, let's talk about the senior housing and healthcare spectrum, right? So you've got the 55 and older communities that are standalone all the way up to nursing and rehab. The more help you need along the spectrum, the more the cost, right? So assisted living is always going to probably be more than independent living. Memory care is going to be a little bit more than assisted living, right? That's how it works. So let's talk about life plan and CCRC communities. So sometimes you will hear continuing care retirement communities or CCRCs or life plan. It's all the same thing. What these are communities where they have all of these levels. So they have independent, assisted, memory, and nursing all under one umbrella. And these are the ones where you typically pay an entrance fee to get in and then a monthly rental fee, right? So there are a lot of people who automatically discount this option because they don't want to pay the entrance fee. So my argument is you shouldn't discount the option because you don't even know if you can afford it or not. It's not about the money. But when you do something like this, you are then guaranteed access to care because all of the levels of care are under that umbrella. So you can imagine if you move into a retirement community and you're moving together, and let's say your spouse has mild cognitive impairment. And remember, mild cognitive impairment or MCI is dementia. It's the same thing, right? So this person has dementia and it's under this MCI, which means early onset. So they are going to get progressively worse. So you could potentially move into independent together. And at some point, maybe the person with the dementia might need to move to memory care, but that way you're still under the same system, right? So that is the benefit. There are some people who like this model and some people who don't. There is no right or wrong. You have to figure out what's right for you. And it's all about touring and understanding environments, which is what Silver Bridges can help you figure out. The other types of communities that we call are senior living. And they are the ones that have independent, assisted, and memory care. Some of them are just assisted and memory care, which is standalone. But I like to clump them. The independent, assisted, memory care are kind of the senior living ones communities. They're typically monthly fees. So monthly rental fees, right? So there's no entrance fee to pay up front. It's just a monthly rental fee, usually a 30-day notice, and you can move in and move out. So the pricing structure is completely different. What you notice is they don't have access to nursing in this model, which doesn't matter. It just is what it is. So if you needed some kind of nursing, you would have to leave the system, right? That's all that means. The other thing is like I had a couple who they were married and he had a very aggressive form of dementia. So we knew that his life expectancy was going to be probably 3 years and she was going to outlive him. So her children really wanted them to move near them. We had a whole conversation with her. This is a whole nother thing about do you move near your kids? Like you have to have that realistic conversation. I asked her where she wanted to be, when she outlived her husband. She's like, I love my house and I love my neighborhood. So we actually were able to show her through the process that we used that they could keep the house, they could move into independent living together under the rental program. And then as he progressed and when he moved to memory care, she moved back to the house, right? Nobody would have thought that they were like, there's no way we can afford it. But I'm telling you, you can actually do a lot more than you think you can if you just really understand how the numbers work, right? So that's just one example. Mention long-term care services. 3 years of long-term care services. This right here is long-term care services. Assisted, memory, nursing, and rehab. That's what's determined as long-term care services. So if you have a long-term care insurance policy, for those of you that have a long-term care insurance policy, I need you to pull out your policy. I need you to read it and I need you to understand it, right? And reach out to the company and you can ask them for an in-force illustration that'll give you kind of what the numbers are today. And you can see what the daily rates are at these different levels of care, assisted living, memory care, and nursing care, which are typically long-term care services. But you probably also have a home benefit in your insurance policy. And I want to let you know that that home benefit in your long-term care insurance policy doesn't just mean the home that you're in right now. It's the home wherever you are. So if you leave your house or condo and you move into a retirement community or you move into a senior living community, into independent living, you can use your home care long-term care insurance benefit in your apartment. Most people don't understand that. Most people think I've paid into this long-term care insurance policy, so I'm going to stay home because I'm going to lose it if I move. That's not true. You don't lose it when you move. You still get to use it wherever you go, right? So here are some ranges from cost. Like obviously the range is huge. And this is really where Silver Bridges can help you kind of understand, because it depends on what level of care you need, what part of the country you're in, what kind of environment you want, all the things, right? So there's a huge range in these, but just to give you an idea of some numbers. Okay, so we've talked about home care. We've talked about communities. Now I want to talk specifically about caregivers because this is real. That since the pandemic, that there has been a nursing shortage in senior housing and healthcare that has been going on for 6 years, right? And so what happened is, that the caregiver workforce, when it declined, they estimated 250,000 nurses left the industry during COVID. And they started coming back, they started hiring new people, but those people are younger and less experienced, right? So at the same time that the caregiver workforce went down, all the boomers, like everybody's getting older and there's more and more people getting older and they're living longer and they need help for longer than they thought. And so this idea of how am I going to get access to care? This is why the planning part is very, very important, right? This idea of talking through, do you want to stay home? Do you want to move? How am I going to have access to the care that I need when I need it? You can't put your head in the sand and just basically think that whatever money you have is going to solve the problem at the time. Because everybody with money is throwing money at the same situation, right? So it doesn't work like that. So that also puts a lot of burden on the family caregiver because these home care agencies are fighting over people. If you're unhappy with your home care agency and you fire them, there's 10 other families waiting to hire them right away, right? So it's like a game. But so if you are the primary caregiver for your spouse or your loved one or whoever, you're no longer just doing one job. You're coordinating all of these things. You're responsible for figuring out doctor's appointments. You're being the care. How are we going to get from point A to point B? Are we going to stay here? Are we going to move? Who's managing the money? How are we communicating what's going on to the kids that are asking a million questions? Or the best friend. I always tell everybody, don't forget the best friend, right? The best friends are always really want to be involved and know what's happening as well. So this is a lot for the primary caregiver to deal with. Not to mention, if your loved one goes to the hospital, everyone's getting discharged quicker and sicker. Those days where people stayed in the hospital for 4 or 5 days, those have been gone for decades. Trying to stay there 3 days these days right now to qualify for the Medicare benefit is even difficult, right? So what they're doing is they're sending you home with little to no training, and they're giving you a book or a list to tell you to go figure it out, right? So it's very overwhelming and very scary. Back to the planning, back to the thinking this through and talking this through so that when the emergency happens, you're not in the dark. You have an idea of what you want to do. So access is really like a game of musical chairs. So you heard me say earlier, like when you go to a CCRC, you have access to all the levels. When you go to senior living, you have access to certain levels. When you stay home, care managers can make sure you have access to the care that you need when you need because they're the professionals within the system. So there's all, regardless if you're home or move, having access to the care when you need it is the most important thing. Preparation and planning is what gets you there and make sure that you get a chair, right? If you put your head on the sand and you think it's just going to happen like that, you might be left out, you might be scrambling, right? So where do I start? Planning first, right? SEIA's philosophy is planning first. And that's exactly why I was hired. I was hired to be the healthcare planning strategist. How do we help people plan for the years between retirement and death when all the housing and the care decisions happen, right? When you talk to financial professionals, most times people want to go straight to the portfolio. I don't want to talk about the portfolio. I need to figure out what the job of the portfolio is first. What does the portfolio need to do before we jump into the portfolio? So the real question is, what's their income? That's where you should start, right? So you might have Social Security. You might have a pension coming in. For those of you that have IRAs, you know you're responsible for taking your required minimum distribution at a certain age every year, right? So that might be counted as your income. Maybe you are a widow and you have a survivor benefit. Maybe some way along the way you bought an annuity, or maybe you're already, getting some interest from your investments. You're not reinvesting them, but you're just, putting them into an account of some sort for saving for a rainy day. So you have to understand your income sources. If you are a couple, typically one person understands this list and the other one doesn't. So here is my challenge to you. If you don't know your family's list, you need to know your family's list, right? This needs to be a shared discussion because the person that has all the knowledge, if something happens to them tomorrow, then everybody's scrambling to figure out where it is. I had this happen with a family where the husband did everything. The wife had MS. The husband was healthy, no heart issues, no heart history, was healthy, but he took care of everything. He had a stroke. Even the doctor's like, he had a stroke. He was in rehab. He can't walk. So now she's scrambling, trying to figure it out. Like, thankfully, they had heard me speak. And when the emergency happened, they called and we were able to get them settled, because he could communicate, thankfully. But what if he couldn't, right? And nobody knew where anything was. So the question is, once you know all your income, right, you have to determine what the cost of care and housing is and support or whatever. So this is where you start doing the hypotheticals. You might not be in the situation right now where you know these things, but in your head, you're already bouncing around ideas. This idea of staying home, how do we build that scenario out? What does that look like? This idea of moving to maybe community type A with this contract type, what does that look like? This idea of moving to Colorado near our grandkids, what does that, and buying a condo, what does that look like? All those different scenarios could be different blue lines, right? That you need to compare. So sometimes you have a cushion, your income and what you're actually think you're going to spend. You've got money left over, kudos. This would be an example of my parents because they had so much income that the cost of care was good, right? This is my father-in-law because all he had was Social Security. All these other things didn't, except for interest from his investments and his RMDs, but he didn't have a pension. So he was still able to move. But this right here is where you talk about the job of the portfolio. What does the portfolio need to do? How do we need to generate enough income from the portfolio to pay for whatever care and housing that you want? I think this is really important exercise because what happens is people will think they can't afford something and then they'll try to compromise to a smaller place or a place they don't really like, but they're not happy. So either they don't move or they move and they're unhappy, right? So that we don't want you to do that. And on the other side, a lot of adult children, they're starting to look around for their parents and they want to pick the brand new. I just had to tell a daughter the other day. Daughter is a professor at a very nice college and she's looking around for her parents. And I'm like, your parents can't afford that. Your parents can't afford $15,000 a month. They don't have that income. And so you have to be realistic and figure out what your income is and what the cost is, and then figure out where you can compromise. If you have long-term care insurance, I get this all the time. Well, I have long-term care insurance. It's covered. No, it's not. Long-term care insurance is just one more income source. And in a lot of cases, back to you need to go understand your daily benefit. Your daily benefit may not fully cover the cost of the care that you may need to plan for down the road, especially something like someone with a dementia diagnosis and a memory care, right? You may be just getting a fraction of what the actual cost is as income from long-term care insurance. So here's an example of a portfolio. Just hard. I'm going to get a little nerdy now on the financial side. So those financial people, you're with me. Everybody else, just I'll try to go slow. So this line right here, I know it's a little weird, but the gray, you can imagine if you're working with a financial professional right now and you're in this midst of trying to make a decision of do you stay home, do you move, do you go to this community, they may look at these lines and go, you're fine. You've got plenty of money. Like this is going to keep growing. You can afford it. Go for it, right? But I'm here to tell you, we need to do some real modeling. We don't need to do an average of 3 years if someone has a dementia diagnosis. That's not realistic. So then I start saying, how do we model things out? What if there's a market drop? What if you move into like a CCRC or independent living, right? And as you age in place in your independent living apartment, you don't really want to move to assisted living yet. So you're going to bring in some home care. Maybe you don't have long-term care insurance. You can still private pay it for a while, right? So this portfolio starts out a little bit, under 2 million. It doesn't matter. We have clients who have 1 million and we have clients who have 30 million, 50 million. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Everybody has anxiety about, am I going to run out of money as things get more expensive and we get older? Because you don't know how long you're going to live and you don't know how much care you're going to need, right? So building these hypothetical scenarios for our clients is what brings them peace and lowers their anxiety. So in this case, we're going to make some assumptions. You move, we add in home care, you move to memory care, and you can see the blue is actually what your portfolio can do, as opposed to the gray when you're not actually putting in real numbers, right? But even throwing in these numbers, you're still doing fine. And the reason is the portfolio is being actively managed. If you are with a financial advisor who doesn't understand how to actively manage the portfolio during these years, retirement years, you need to start asking some better questions. Examples like, how do you protect the downsides from a withdrawal, right? Do we need to do some sell? I'm getting real nerdy on the financial side. But this is not the time in your life to let the portfolio set it and forget it, right? You have to actively manage it so that when it's time for you to draw down from it, you've thought it through, you know exactly where you're pulling from, you're watching, how it's going, cap games, all those things. So you got to worry about liquidity, tax withholding, and I have another slide that talks a little bit about tax and insurance. Distributions accelerated. This is really nerd out. If you have an IRA, you know how you're required to take your required minimum distribution every year, right? And it's counted as income. And you always get nervous because it's going to bump me up into a different income bracket, and it's very stressful for a lot of people. Well, if you have care, if you're doing home care or you move to assisted living or memory care, you then fall into that medical deduction bucket, right? So when you have the medical deductions that you can start taking off your taxes, there actually is a math problem that CPAs and wealth advisors like us at SEIA know how to do, that you might be able to take a little bit more money out of your IRA without that extra penalty that you would normally have to pay and still keep you in your tax bracket, right? Back to that Excel spreadsheet can't figure that out. Only a true high-powered financial system can. But there are ways to do that and maximize getting some extra cash flow so you can pay for care. So these are just some examples of some of the financial stuff. But the key is the planning. Remember, I started out by saying we have to figure out what the job of the portfolio is. So the first step is understanding your reality. Are we comparing home versus move? Are you 100% want to stay home, but we need to plan for different circumstances? Are you looking at different areas to whatever's going on in your head? What are the different realities? Also including healthcare. What are your diagnoses? So this is where care management can really help in as well, is putting together some anticipated timelines of care needs. Like, me, Ginger, and Christy, we've been around this forever, so we can tell you a little bit about what's going to happen. But sometimes a care manager coming in and doing an assessment is also very helpful. Then we build the scenarios and we put together a plan of action. So the idea is to give you information so you can make a better informed decision and realize that I can actually afford to do what I think I want to do, and then help have Silver Bridges find you the right place, right? That is the key. How do you go look for places without the anxiety of looking at the price? You need to figure that part out. So before we work with families, people are like confused, anxious. Everybody's stressed out that their portfolio is going to tank and they're all going to run out of money, especially a caregiver. If you have two and one person has dementia, everyone's afraid that all the money is going to be spent on the sick person and the well person's going to live and there's going to be no money left. I also deal a lot with solo agers, like I mentioned earlier, people who are planners and like, what's going to happen? Who's my 3 a.m. call? Who's going to help me when I can't help myself? And how am I going to make sure that I'm not going to end out on the street? Right? This is the process that helps people lower that anxiety. So when you have a plan, you don't have to wonder, worry, or disagree about what's going to happen. You do not want to be having these conversations in the emergency room about what mom or dad wanted, right? Have the conversations now. If you have not started having these conversations with your adult children, you need to start because they have opinions. Adult daughters have opinions. And so if you wait till the 11th hour and then tell them the decision, they're going to throw a bunch of questions at you. So the best thing to do now is tell them, like, this is what we're thinking, this is why, and engage the professionals in senior housing and healthcare to help you walk through those scenarios and those discussions as a family so that when the decision is made, everybody's felt like, okay, yeah, this was the right thing to do, right? So very important. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about SEIA before we go into Q&A. So everyone's always like, well, what do you do? So SEIA, we are based out of California. We are a registered investment advisor. So RIA, wealth management firm. Yes, we are fiduciaries. I get that question all the time. So SEIA is about a $30 billion company. And I mentioned Tom earlier in my presentation. So Tom West is one of the three partners here in the DC area that manages the East Coast office. And so we primarily have clients up and down the East Coast, but I do have clients all over the country. I have clients in California, I have clients in Chicago, I have clients. So it doesn't matter where people live. Our service area is broad and the range of ages that we cover. So we do your normal pre-retirement planning. So we have clients in their 30s and 40s. We have clients in their 50s and 60s, but I'm the one that specializes in the post-retirement years. So that's kind of my space. So this is our team. We actually get a lot of awards for what we do in this space because we know that nobody else really understands what's happening. And trust me, I don't want to be the only one. We've been looking around. What actually has to happen is someone with some senior housing and healthcare experience has to go take financial tests. So that was definitely a hurdle that I wasn't planning to do. And I had to do at the age of 50. Once I was on the other side of it, I was very happy I did it. I absolutely love what I do. And I'm hoping that we can get more people in this space to do this education. And when we talk to clients, it's not just about the investments. You hear me talk about, I talked a little bit about investment strategy, but the investments is just one piece, right? We do financial planning, we do insurance planning, we do tax planning. Tax planning is really important in this time in your life. Very, very important, the tax planning. Trust in the state. We are not attorneys, but by God, financial people need to understand your documents because sometimes you had your documents done 20 years ago and we read them and the way it's written is not what you think it is. And then access to money gets locked up. So it's really important through financial lens to read your estate documents to make sure we understand how the money is going to flow and that you understand how the money is going to flow. If you need to update your documents haven't been updated in decades, and if someone has a new diagnosis of any sort, cancer diagnosis, dementia diagnosis, Parkinson's diagnosis, please get your documents updated sooner than later. Because if that person loses capacity, there's nothing anybody can do. And then you got to go to the court and nobody wants to do that, right? So if it's time to update your documents, I do suggest that you go to an elder law attorney, not just a general estate and trust attorney, but go to an elder law attorney because they also do estate and trust. Elder law attorneys are the ones that focus in this time frame that I focus in. So their language is usually really targeted and they can talk you through some really difficult conversations about what's going to happen later in life, right? So elder law attorney is the little tip. And then one more thing I'll touch on before we get to Q&A is how we manage money. So there's two ways to manage money. The first is what's called discretionary, and that's not what we do. Discretionary is basically you give it to the advisor, they make all the decisions, and then you get your quarterly thing and you see what happened, right? Non-discretionary is what we do, and we call it sharing the baton. So there are a lot of you on here who may have been do-it-yourselfers, managing your portfolio all along by yourself, doing just fine, right? And so you don't necessarily want to hand it over to somebody, but you're also getting to the point where I'm not sure I want to continue to do this forever, or your spouse knows nothing about it. And if something happens to you, then your spouse, we get a lot of widows who basically come to us because they feel like we understand the retirement space. And we also understand what it's like to have to transition into something that you really never had to be responsible for. So part of the sharing the baton is we do this together, and that's what's called non-discretionary. The other really important thing about non-discretionary is it allows us to make little changes in the portfolio. If you're in a model portfolio, which is traditionally the other way, anytime you sell, it's like blocks and there's a tax hit. But most of you have some kind of concentrated position. You might have a lot of Apple stock. You might have a lot of Tesla stock. You might have a stock that your dad gave you 50 years ago. It has a lot of cap gains on it. Nobody wants to pay tax on that. So with non-discretionary, what that means, it means that we can actually go around what other positions are there and build around the concentrated position and come up with a strategy over time using the scenarios and using the analysis to figure out how can we do this from a tax planning perspective to unlock the money to make sure you have access to what you need, right? So during this phase in life, whatever financial professional you're dealing with, they need to really actively be managing the portfolio, and that includes access to alternative strategies, right? Because alternative strategies don't have to be risky, but the return on alternative strategies is way higher than normal. We get clients coming to us who only want to do CDs, and we show scenarios and we show them how their CDs aren't going to do it because there's not going to give them enough money. So we then show them, like, if you invest in these strategies and not risky, we can keep a low risk profile, but not do a CD and do a couple other strategies, we can get income double and triple sometimes in anticipation of costs going up over time because of care, right? So I'd like to just give a little overview of how SEIA works. And I'm part of the team. I come with the team. We don't charge by the hour. We're a flat rate. What you see, all of it is what we do. No nickel and diming. All right.
This is awesome, Arvette. And by the way, folks, please definitely throw your questions in the Q&A. We have a couple. I'll get them to you, Arvette.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, yeah.
Where did it go? Where did it go?
Oh,
I got a weird thing on it. Okay, there we are. Am I still? There it is.
yeah, there
It
you
flew
go.
behind something. I'm
That's
back.
okay. That's okay. Karen asked, what is an asset protection plan? You mentioned that at some point.
Asset protection plan. So, asset protection plan. I don't think I mentioned that, but it sounds like
Okay.
when I was talking about the Medicaid thing,
Mm.
like asset protection plan is how do we protect your assets so that if you need money, it doesn't go to the government or your family has money, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. Like your kids, your family wants you to have access to good care. They also want you to be somewhere where they want to visit you, right? So I tell families like if you want to go down the Medicaid planning road, which is a great road for some people that need it financially, but a lot of people don't. Do you want your mom in a Medicaid nursing home where you have to go visit her there? How about you go visit the one down the street from your house right now and imagine your mom being there before you make that decision? Because when you start getting to the asset protection plan and hiding things and irrevocable trust, there's no turning back. It's like you hit a fork in the road. You go this way and you're stuck. There's nothing you can do to undo it. So make sure you really understand that piece before you commit to it. So that is typically when people talk about asset protection.
That's awesome.
Very good. Okay, the next question is there a minimal amount of money that people need in order to use your services to work with SEIU?
Yeah, so SCIA minimum is $1 million, but I also do consults just like Ginger and Christy. So if you just have some general questions and you just want to ask, like call me or email me and we'll see if we can get on a time. Because the one thing I can tell you about senior housing and healthcare is we are a very tight network of resources, right? And it doesn't matter where, like we can call people, Christy and Ginger are the same. We can call people all over the country to find resources for people. So it might not be me, but I might be able to connect you with somebody else that may be able to help you and drive you in the right direction. So $1 million is our minimum. And like I said, we have clients $1 million and $50 million and
Is
everything in
that
between.
a million liquid or is that
A
like
million in investments. So
an
not like a
investment?
house. So their
Okay.
house doesn't count. It's a
Okay.
million in investments.
Awesome.
Investments.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, hang on a second. It says,
Okay.
I'll get you to answer this one, but it says, are you charged more to go into a community if you have a health problem?
So it's not that you charge more, it depends on the community. And this is where Silver Bridges would do a great idea, but I'm going to answer it. So when you go into a community, there's independent assisted memory care nursing, right? Remember? So you're going to be assessed. And depending on where you're assessed is going to depend on the cost. Because remember, I told you in that chart, the more care you need, the higher the cost. So there are couples like that can move into independent living together. So one person might have MCI, mild cognitive impairment, and one might be the caregiver. Okay. So some communities will say, okay, you guys can move into independent living together because the well spouse can help up until the point where it's too much for the well spouse, and then you can bring in home care or that person can move or whatever. So I don't want you to think like you can't go together if someone already has some issues. That's something that needs to be talked through. But in general, the more care you need, the higher the cost is going to be.
Yep, exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Arvette, can you repeat the Care Management Trade Association website?
Oh yeah, aging. If you look up ALCA, ALCA. Hold on, let me go back.
Aging Life Care Association.
Association, Aging Life Care Association. Hold on, I'm going back in my slides. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So if you just put in the website is Aging Life Care. So Aging Life Care, or if you look up Aging Life Care Association, it's called ALCA, and you literally can do a search by zip code. And if it's anybody local, just send me an email. Like I know all the ones in Maryland, Virginia, DC, like I know all of them. So just send me an email and then we can talk a little bit about what you're looking for. And then that might be helpful to point you in the right direction. Because some of them cover certain territories and not other territories. And some of them have more experience with certain conditions than other ones do. So, yeah.
This is an interesting question. I love your opinion on it. So, if whether you're in a CCRC or whether you're in a rental community, you're in assisted living now or memory care, whatever, how much of that can you really deduct as a medical deduction from your taxes?
Okay, so it depends on the contract type, right? So that's a whole nother conversation. But every community that you live in, if you live in a community, they are going to give you a letter at the beginning of next year to give to your tax CPA. And at that point, if there's medical deductions, you need to have a CPA. I'm just going to push. Like you might have been doing your taxes for 50 years, but things are getting complicated. You need to go to a CPA. So you will get a letter and they will tell you exactly how much is deductible that you can give to your CPA. So it's not a calculation that you have to do.
Is it if you're in a rental community and you've now moved and so you're getting services essentially from the community? Um, any,
Yeah. So anything, if the community is providing services for you that can be counted as a medical deduction,
yeah,
they will give you the letter. If you have a home care company that's coming into your home or coming to independent living, they can give you a letter. That is also counted as a medical deduction.
okay.
Um, Also, back to care management, sometimes long-term care insurance policies have care management in your policy. So pull out the policy because sometimes there's a aging, they mostly call it care management. Aging life care is kind of a new term in the last like 5 years. So
Yeah,
it probably says care management services. That might actually be in your policy as well.
great.
All right, so how does SEIA, how do you charge for your services?
So we, just like every other registered investment advisor, it's a percentage of assets, right? So whatever assets we're managing, we charge a percentage of asset and that percentage changes on how much we're managing. But the more important thing is everything else we do is included. So we don't charge additional for tax planning, estate review, insurance review, anything that I do, like the scenarios and the analysis of home versus move, all of that's included in that 1%. I'm sorry, that percentage, not 1%, that percentage fee. 1% is usually on the top side, usually on the top side of 1.2%, and then it goes down depending on how much we're managing. But I think the key is we don't nickel and dime. We want to be the person that you call, so we don't charge by the hour. So if there's any kind of question, a tax question, a healthcare question, investment question, any question, you call us, you email us, we'll figure it out, and we're not charging you by the hour. And we also don't sell product. So we don't get commissions on anything. Like true fiduciary, you are our client. You're the only person that pays us. That's how we operate.
That's awesome, awesome. So there are a couple of things as we finish up here. Guess what? You're going to get a copy of the presentation, okay? of the recording. Sorry,
Recording.
not of the
Yeah.
slides, of the recording, along with our vet's contact information, our contact information, a little bit more about that. I know there's a number of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, but we have them and we've captured them, and we can absolutely follow up with you with regards to getting those answers for you. Okay, here's the situation. I have a favor, a big favor, is that as soon as I hit into this presentation, there's going to be a pop-up survey. And when someone says survey, I'm like, I never take surveys. I'm asking you to do the survey because it's only 4 questions and it just gives us feedback on the content. How did that go? Did you enjoy? Did you not? Was it effective for you? Other thoughts that you have about other presentations that we could do in the future? Do you want more information about our vet or us? So it'll take you, I'm not kidding you, 2 minutes, I promise you. If you would do that for us, and then what we're going to do is to follow up with to you all right, with that email information and a copy of the recording. Okay, so Arvet,
Yes.
thank you so
Thank
Ah,
much.
you.
thank you for having me.
I mean,
Excellent job.
just an excellent job as always. We're so grateful to have you. We've known Arvet a very long time. And she's just a cool person too.
Oh,
I
you
got to
guys,
tell you. Yeah,
I
yeah,
love doing this.
yeah. So, thank you all. Very good. And more to come across the next several days in terms of the information coming your way.
All right.
Thank you
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
All right.
Take
Hang
care.
on for the survey. All right.
All right. Bye bye.